Alright, Hamlet. Laertes has just stabbed you with his rapier, which is in fact sharp. What are you going to do? Actually, first I need you to make a Constitution saving throw. 19. Why? No reason. It's fine. Okay. So I just multi-classed into Battlemaster. I would like to attempt to disarm him. Okay, just let me check that real quick. Okay. Yeah, just roll your attack. 15? Okay. It just hits. What saving throw does Laertes have to make? Okay. A strength save of 16. 6. Okay. He fails. As you swing your rapier towards him, you are able to hook it into the handle of his and toss it out of his hand. What do you do now? Great. Can I pick it up? Okay, yeah. You use your movement and you're able to pick up Laertes' weapon. I shall offer him mine and offer to play another bout. Top of the round. Laertes swings, and he misses. Your turn, Hamlet. I'd like to attack. Okay, go for it. Natural 20. Alright, roll for damage. Okay. 17 piercing. Alright, as you thrust your blade, it hits Laertes. He fails his Constitution saving throw and says, "Why, as a woodcock to mine own spring, Josric, I am justly killed by my own treachery." Okay. How's my mother? She turns to you. She's a sickly color. She says, the drink, I am poisoned." She collapses in a coughing fit and is seemingly dead. A minute has passed. Hamlet, make another Constitution saving throw. 5. Okay. You feel the poison from Laertes' blade beginning to take effect. What will you do now? Studying theater has been great. Getting to analyze plays, act, and learning tech has really given me a deep appreciation for theater as a whole. However, in looking at the art form, I've noticed something. Theater just doesn't have the same popularity that it used to. It is heavily outperformed in viewership than most other forms of entertainment. Film and television have a larger audience yearly than what many consider the, quote, most professional theater, Broadway. In the 2016-2017 season, Broadway had 13.2 million attendees. Of course, those numbers don't account for audience members who go see multiple shows in one season, so the actual total attendance is probably less. Hell, there are hundreds of YouTube videos that receive more viewings than the entire sales year of the best theater in the world. So this got me thinking. Theater really can't be dying, can it? Well, no. Art forms don't just disappear. They shift and change and transform into new forms. I believe theater has always existed. The earliest version of theatrical performances was when humans would tell each other stories around the campfire. Theater, as we know it today, started in antiquity, in huge amphitheaters. The modern theater has moved to a smaller, more intimate space, utilizing more technology. But where is it now? Well, I think that theater has moved back to its primal form in the modern age. people telling each other stories in intimate spaces through a very modern medium. Tabletop gaming. There are many aspects involved in the tabletop role-playing game that make it theatrical. Players take on the role of actors. Game masters are directors, dramaturges, and playwrights, and the entire performance is done live. Decisions are set in stone when they are made. In these ways, tabletop role-playing games share a performance space with theater and are, in fact, a form of theater themselves. Part 1. Players. Players are the actors in this new form of theater. They are the ones who are playing the characters. That is definitively what an actor does. A player's job at the role-playing table is to take on the life of a fictional character and, within the game world, act like the character as opposed to themselves. This is where the aspect of performing comes into tabletop role-playing games. Role-playing as your character is an integral part of the experience. Many games blend mechanics with the actual role-playing of a character. Dogs in the Vineyard, for example, is a tabletop role-playing game that lets the players completely customize their character through the story. Now, finding a copy of this game was a little tedious, because it is no longer in print, and the only available copy on Amazon is $2,600 used, so you'll just have to excuse me for using a PDF. In the character creation section, Dogs of the Vineyard allows a player to create traits for their character to roleplay. These traits, however, are also used to determine the mechanical skill of the character. If you can't think of any traits to start with, try this trick. Write, "I'm a good shot," on your character sheet. "I'm a good shot" is always a safe take. Now ask yourself, where did my character learn to shoot? From whom? What were the circumstances? Tease a second trait out of the circumstances, something like, "I used to hunt with my brother," or "I once killed a wolf that was killing my family's calves," or "I fought a year in the territorial army." For your character's third trait, choose something unrelated but opposed for balance. "I'm a good cook, too," maybe, or "I'm well read," or "I know the names of the constellations." Now you're underway, and it should be no problem to come up with a couple more traits as you need them. Now, to anyone with an acting background, this method of character creation should sound similar in some ways. A popular piece of acting theory used by many acting teachers is that of Uta Hagen, in her book Appreciation for Acting. Hagen asks an actor to question their character. Who am I? What are my circumstances? What are my relationships? What do I want? What's in my way? What do I do to get what I want? These questions are used in realistic acting to aid an actor in truly finding their character and fleshing it out as a real person. Dungeons & Dragons also does this with its players. A similar range of questions is asked on a player's character sheet. Traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws are what a player must write about their character. To define them, let's take a look in the player's handbook. Traits. Personality traits are small, simple ways to help you set your character apart from every other character. So this answer Hagen's "Who am I?" Ideals. Your ideals are what you believe in most strongly, the fundamental moral and ethical principles to compel you to act as you do. This is "What do I want?" Bonds. Bonds represent a character's connection to people, places, and events in the world. This is "What are my relationships?" Finally, Flaws. Your character's flaws represent some vice, compulsion, fear, or weakness. This answers Hagen's "What's in my way?" On creating RPG characters, Tobin Nellhaus writes, "Sometimes the backstory is quite particular, furnishing the character with a biography, motivations, attitudes, fears, desires, and other traits. In this way, the character can become nearly as detailed and individual as many modern dramatic characters." In this way, Nellhaus proves that creating characters like these can be similar to theatrical characters. If the characters are role-played as well, then they become mirrorings of characters seen on stage. Part 2. Game Masters. Much like how the player plays an important role in the theatrics of tabletop role-playing games, the Game Master also has an important role to fill. Firstly, the Game Master must do everything a player does, but instead of hyper-focusing on one character, a Game Master must act out every other character in the game world, whether it be other people or the monsters that the players fight. Yet, a Game Master is more than just another actor. The Game Master must write the adventures that the players will partake in, build a world for them to explore, as well as interpret characters' backstories and incorporate them into the game. To quote the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, a Dungeon Master gets to wear many hats: as the architect of a campaign, as a storyteller, as an actor. Inventing, writing, storytelling, improvising, acting, refereeing. Every DM handles these roles differently. This is what differentiates tabletop role-playing games to the online role-playing games that Nellhaus writes on. Video games have been pre-programmed to interact with and allow the players to interact in certain ways. A Game Master is free to interact with the players in any way he or she would like to. This creates the idea of a GM being a director. It is the Game Master's job to direct the actions of the players in the world. A player wants to punch someone in the face? A GM must allow the player to do so. Can I punch the man in the face? Well, you can most certainly try. It is not the job of the GM to tell the players what to do, but to help them do it. In this way, the Game Master is like a benevolent director. Yet, it is equally as important for a GM to create intriguing drama that makes the characters want to keep performing. This is how a Game Master becomes a playwright and dramaturge. It is the job of a dramaturge to analyze and interpret works of theater. A Game Master must interpret the characters' backstories and creatively write them into the overarching story. This is how they pick up the role of the playwright. It is the Game Master's duty to create a grand story in which the players may take part. A GM running a campaign of Curse of Strahd for players would be a lot like Shakespeare presenting one of his plays at the Globe Theatre. Well, maybe not exactly, but you get the point. Part 3. Live performing. Tabletop role-playing games are played live. What I mean by this is, much like theater, the events and performances of players and game masters happen in front of a live audience themselves. What this means is if a decision is made in the game, it is permanent. There are no save points or do-overs like video games. It is precisely like if an actor messes up a line or skips a cue on stage. It has happened, it is permanent, and the rest of the actors have to work around the problem. In Dungeons & Dragons, for example, if the bard messes up his diplomacy, the rest of the party has to deal with the problem he has caused. This leads us to the idea of an audience. Everyone who is playing at the table is part of the audience. While the players are acting, other players and the Game Master are watching them. The nature of a tabletop role-playing game is to collaboratively tell a story. This means that when someone contributes to the story through acting, everyone else must listen and watch. This means at any given point, there is always an audience in a tabletop role-playing game. Our friend Nellhaus writes that there's a special social relationship in theater. One of its key social relationships is the duality between being a performer or a spectator, which improvisational performers and spect actors readily switch between. Actors are also spectators simultaneously. This is especially true when it comes to tabletop role-playing games. Still aren't sold on this whole idea of role-playing games being a theater? Well, let's take a look at a few definitions. Oxford Dictionary defines theater as, quote, a play or other activity or presentation considered in terms of its dramatic quality, end quote. This is kind of vague. However, that allows, for the sake of my argument, some room to fit tabletop gaming into that definition. Role-playing can become pretty intense and possess a, quote, dramatic quality, end quote. Listen, I get it. One source doesn't prove my point, so let's pull up the most scholarly source possible, Wikipedia. Let me just put on my scholarly voice here. Theatre, or theatre, is a collaborative form of fine art that uses live performers, typically actors or actresses, to present the experience of a real or imagined event before a live audience in a specific place, often a stage. The performers may communicate this experience to the audience through combinations of gesture, speech, song, music, and dance. So, there's a lot to unpack here. Collaborative form. Tabletop role-playing games are by nature collaborative. Live performers, the games are at their core played live. Typically actors or actresses, we've already proved this, to present the experience of a real or imagined event. Well, tabletop role-playing games are versatile and can be played in any setting. Dungeons and Dragons is typically a high fantasy setting, while Dogs in the Vineyard is sort of Western American. Performed in a specific place. The table becomes, in this way, a special place. So, two definitions work. Let's again go back to Tobin Nellhaus. He wrote on the idea of online role-playing games as theater. And he said, quote, theater's intrinsic aspect, the activity of producing and enjoying a fictional world. The actors are in character, and the spectators are, quote, in world. Thus, a real human plays the fictional. What about this?
Roll damage.
That's 11 points of damage.
11 points of damage.
Come on.
That's a lot of calculator. Fuck. How do you want to do this?
That was a clip of Dungeons and Dragons being played live in front of a paying audience in New York City, specifically from a show called Critical Role. The premise is it is a Twitch live-streamed D&D game played by professional voice actors. Having a turnout that large really proves the popularity of tabletop games as a spectacle. People enjoy watching others play these games. In 2017, Dungeons & Dragons had its biggest year of sales in its entire 44-year-long existence. Over 8 million people have played Dungeons & Dragons within the last year, and over 9.5 million people have watched others play it live via Twitch in 2017. 9.5 million people just watching a Dungeons & Dragons livestream. When compared to the 13.2 million people that attended Broadway in the same year, that 9.5 million doesn't seem that shabby. Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games are, by nature, theatrical. As we see traditional theater being to stagnate in popularity and attendance, the popularity of both playing and watching others play tabletop role-playing games grows. Tobin Nellhaus argues that online role-playing games are theater, but he points out, quote, "The problem is that to answer this question, one must first have a working definition of theater." As problematic as this is, tabletop role-playing games fit into multiple definitions of theater. They have actors, directors, writers, and are played live. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that these games are theater. With this in mind, we can recognize that theater as an art form is not dying. It is simply being reborn through another medium. And as someone who performs and studies traditional theater, but also is an avid tabletop gamer, I am so excited to see where these mediums are taken in the future. Thanks for watching.